When you're getting promising performances from your rookie and sophomore wide receivers in Dynasty, but you're also getting stealing games from your veterans, how do you identify passing the baton? That more today on the Dynasty Newsletter. I'm your host, Adam Wilde, joined by my co host, Chris Allen. Chris, this all kind of meshed pretty well with a trade offer that you got this week, which was Michael Pittman and a first for Garrett Wilson. So we've got three players to discuss on the rookie sophomore side, and then we have three veterans. Now we've got Pittman, Hill, and I forget if drawing a blank on the third right now, but Hill is going to be the little bit of an outlier because he's also significantly older than some of the other guys that we're discussing. DJ Moore was the third, but we do have guys that are ascending in rankings and guys who they're going to have to descend, right? So how do you kind of figure out when it's time to make these deals with your older wide receivers and the younger wide receivers that are showing promise?
I think for me, it comes down to the mix of wide receivers that I currently have on my roster. And that's not just by age. We also, especially over the last 3 to 4-ish years, it's become much more, the analysis behind wide receivers has become much more nuanced. Like, we're not just bucketing these players just by the wide receiver or just the position tag that sits in front of their name, right? We do have an understanding of the types of routes that these wide receivers run, how they create their production, so we can start to at least gauge what their dynasty value or just what their fantasy production is going to look like as the years go on and on and on. So you can look at a guy, let's say like Mike Evans, for the most part, like while he was still carrying decent target share, regardless of who the quarterback was, like whether it was Jameis Winston like a few years ago to Tom Brady over the last couple of seasons, we knew where his bread was buttered. And it was great to see him get at least more slot usage over the last like couple of years. Last year, more so than 2022. But compare his outlook, let's say, to a wide receiver like, I don't know, let's say like Steph Diggs, completely different. Wide receiver one, I mean, you can put him in that bucket of a wide receiver one, but how they create their fantasy value is so much different, right? Because we know the types of routes that Diggs runs, like used way more inside. And if he is used on the perimeter, intermediate routes, like not taking more, it doesn't have at least a high of an average depth of target that Mike Evans does, but still collecting targets at a similar rate, or at least has at least a target share, air yard share in order to commensurate with being a wide receiver one for his team. And then also if you compare him relative to the rest of the wide receivers in the entire league. So if you start to look at your wide receivers on your roster, at least in those terms, and start to bucket them like in those terms. So if you're looking at, well, how many air yards, or what's their air yard share, target share? I mean, what is their targets per route run? There's so many free tools out there nowadays that will allow you to do that. You can start to then see, okay, well, what's their like either floor ceiling combination just for volume, just for opportunity, and are they earning opportunity based off of like within the team that they're on? Step one. Also, what types of routes, or like how are they earning those targets? So again, it's the Steph Diggs versus Mike Evans decision, or even once we'll get into it, is it because I wouldn't put Michael Pittman in the same tier as Steph Diggs or Mike Evans, but even
Sure.
now, if you want to put like, let's say,
But a
Mike,
little younger. So
absolutely.
then
So
you're starting to think about the years and the production.
exactly. So like a Michael Pittman versus Jalen Waddle type of conversation, like where we know that
Right.
like while Michael Pittman like is better served to be in the slot, to be a zone beater slasher across the middle of the field, Jalen Waddle, I mean, also primarily used at like on the interior as well. But we know at least right now with the concentration of targets between him and Tyreek Hill, I mean, the targets, or at least their earn volume, is much greater, like for Jalen Waddle at this point. So again, it's like you're starting to bucket these players. You're starting to find out, well, what are the commonalities between them and the differentiating factors between them, so that as you start to, it's not just separating them by years, it's not just separating by age, and also it's like not even really separating them by draft capital, because once we start to see them get into the league like a couple of seasons, we can start to ferret out like, okay, well, this guy is still being able to create. I mean, it doesn't like
Yeah,
not it's
Tyreek
not
Hill, what a fifth round pick. I mean, at some point it
exactly.
doesn't matter.
Right. So I think more so like draft capital does become something that comes into play, but that's like for me, step 3-ish. I mean, if there's younger player, absolutely. But if it's a player that's, let's say we're starting to get into like their third-ish season, somewhere in there, it becomes less of a talking point, but more of a, what is their situation? How are they earning targets? Where are they earning targets on the field? I mean, those are the two, at least, factors that I weigh the most when trying to figure out how to value them on my roster.
So let's talk about a few of these guys because it just so happened that they were relevant for good or bad reasons this week. So it just worked out for the conversation. But in terms of ranking these players, it's going to show you that there's no right or wrong answer. Like if you came here for me to tell you exactly here is the model that you are supposed to use, sorry, it was misleading because there isn't one. And I'm going to explain to you why. So out of the 6 that I've mentioned, so Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, DJ Moore, Michael Pittman, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill. The first one I rank first is Jalen Waddle, but then second is Tyreek Hill. And it's like Tyreek Hill's 28 and Tyreek Hill's the better of the wide receivers. So right away, I'm already confusing you. It's like he's the better wide receiver between he and Waddle. He's older, but so how does that work? So Jalen Waddle's first, Tyreek Hill's second for me. Then it's Chris Olave. Then it's Garrett Wilson, who I just recently flipped. And then you can flip a coin between Michael Pittman and DJ Moore. But you have ages all over the place. So it's like there's no way. And this is kind of what you alluded to in that you have to start looking on a player-to-player basis. There's no way to just say, well, Tyreek Hill's older than all of those guys, so I'm just going to take Michael Pittman. You're going to take Michael Pittman at age 25 over someone who's probably going to break the yardage record this year. I mean, and if Tyreek Hill is making you win games you don't want to win because he's going to break the yardage record, then you just need to trade him. You can't just value him the same as Michael Pittman because he doesn't fit your team, which is another thing that you mentioned. It matters how it fits your team as well. So just because Tyreek Hill is 28 or maybe 29 now, I actually have to check that.
Tyreek, 28 right now.
28. Okay. So just because he's 28 doesn't mean that you say, oh, I'm rebuilding, I need to just go ahead and get him off the roster. You probably should get him off your roster to legally tank because there's no point in just being right there in the middle if your team's not worthy of having Tyreek Hill. But you can't just value Michael Pittman more or DJ Moore for that matter. If DJ Moore didn't have that long Hail Mary, we're talking about him in a different light too. So that kind of saved his recent fantasy production as well. Jalen Waddle at the top is perfect because he came in pretty young. He's still very young. And although Tyreek Hill is lighting the league on fire, I will take a 5-year discount. And you're only going from like wide receiver 2 to wide receiver 6 or 7 right now. And Jalen Waddle is going to be able to continue to flourish with Tua going forward, while Tyreek Hill probably 1 or 2 more years. We don't really know, but it's going to be difficult for him to continue being the fastest player in the league for into his 30s. I wouldn't bet on it. I don't know that it's necessarily impossible, but that's not something that I would bet on. So he's second because, well, I just said I'm only going to get a couple years out of him maybe. If he's winning your league for those couple years, that's how he falls earlier regardless of age. But when you get to Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, now you're back to talking about rookies, but you're talking about them over Pittman and DJ Moore because, okay, we're starting to get similar production from these guys at 2-year discounts. And at least with Pittman and Moore, we know that their futures are bad. They're pretty much locked in bad. Zach Wilson's not going to get good at football. I don't care what
Jets fans might believe.
Actually, you know
Jets are coming for you.
You know what? I think the Jets fans agree with me. Actually, I think we're good here.
We're good
with this fan base. I don't know. I saw a lot of Jets fans that were not.
Disclaimer: don't come for me.
When your team is that good, when your team is that good, and you just have to like grit your teeth all game, just hoping Zach Wilson doesn't ruin it, you probably don't have the quarterback of the future. But he was the second overall pick. They're going to keep him for the foreseeable future. So he's locked in. And then the Colts, it's like, don't even want to get started on that organization right now. So yeah, that's a situation where it's like, let's go ahead and buy ourselves a couple years. We have some ambiguity with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and their quarterback situation going forward, but at least you bought the years. So that's where the nuance comes in with ranking. There's no one model that's going to get you to the right answer in terms of age. It really matters where your team is at, what kind of production you're looking for. But I'm going to kick it back over to you. Is there a reason that you would rank differently than me? And what is the nuance to that decision?
I think the nuance is even a deeper thought going into, again, the types of receivers that you have on your roster. So this whole conversation, so that like a peek behind the curtain for the folks listening or watching on YouTube. First of all, Zach Wilson is a Hall of Famer right now, so I don't want no smoke from Jets fans. You
I'm
go after
telling you,
the
I think the Jets fans have flipped.
you go
They're
to the
on my
man
side
on
now.
the opposite side of this. I don't want that smoke. I don't want that.
Especially Justin Fields was, especially since Justin Fields was there.
Don't see, you hit rock bottom and you're starting to dig. So don't do it. I'm just telling you right now, the New York Jets fans, they ain't playing. I ain't playing with them. Like Zach Wilson was better than Josh Allen on Sunday. Put it down that I said that. Okay, Jets fans, I'm with you. But on the serious part, I would say that this year, from a fantasy standpoint and even a real like NFL production standpoint, it's become more apparent that NFL rosters have been highlighted by superstars. And if you don't have a superstar, and like I'm using the term superstar as basically like a basic term right now, but I'll get into it. But if you don't have the superstar on your squad, then your team starts to flounder. Like look at my Cincinnati Bengals, like without Jamar Chase. Fine this week. Thank God we got the running game going. But we saw like how much they struggled in their first game without Jamar Chase, even though they had T. Higgins, they had Tyler Boyd, Hayden Hurst was coming on, and like Joe Mixon was still a part of the squad. The expectation was that, well, we still got really good quality receivers. T. Higgins is good to great. Tyler Boyd is good. Joe Mixon is good. And having those caliber players on your roster is generally fine. But it's the same thing for our dynasty rosters, where if I had a roster that was filled with, let's say, Tyler Lockett's, and let's say even this year's DJ Moore, and just like scrolling through it, like Chris Godwin's, Gabriel Davis, Jerry Jeudy. I mean, at the top, you would roll down that list of them in that roster and just be like, oh, good, it's good, it's good. Oh, Brandon Ayuk, good. Terry McLaurin, good. But that's not great. Like your roster isn't differentiating. It's not like setting yourself apart from the field because you don't have that singular star
They're guys that
player.
can win you
The
weeks.
guys that can win you weeks. And that goes back to the point I was making earlier about target shares. Like, who are those? Do you have that wide receiver one on your squad? The guy that is accruing, earning 25, 30%, 35% air yard shares, target shares, the red zone targets. I mean, all those things that create those massive blow up weeks, like from Cooper Kupp to DK Metcalf, Steph Diggs, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, blah, 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 blah. If you don't have that type of player on your roster, then that's where you'll start off the season. Start of the season, you'll just like go down your roster, like, oh man, look at this guy I got. I got Drake London, I got George Pickens, I got Brandon Ayuk, I've got Juju, I've got all these other guys, and most folks be like, yeah, it's pretty good. That's good. That's good. That's good. But when you go to set your roster, and then you go up against that team with Justin Jefferson, you go up against that team that's still got Cooper Kupp, Rock and Tyreek Hill, like those guys that are top 12, like in the league, like without a doubt, like no problems, Jamar Chase, like whatever. That is where you'll come up with, oh, your score, your weekly score might be good. 110, 115 PPR points, 130 PPR points, it's good. But you go up against that Tyreek Hill squad where he's rocking 180 yards per week and a touchdown, and you're down like 40 points like before the afternoon game start on Sunday, you're like, well, my team is not good. My team is not capable of competing with those guys. And so that's where I would want to have that, at least one of those receivers that has the capability of doing that like on a weekly basis.
But then you run into the issue that then if you need that Tyreek Hill on your roster and you don't already have him, good luck paying for him without being detrimental to your roster. So then that brings to the discussion, why do you rank Jalen Waddle ahead of Tyreek Hill so early? I had Jalen Waddle in the top 10 this summer, which was very early. That was before we got to see anything from Tua. And the whole point was, well, if he's ever going to be the wide receiver 6, I need to get him now, not after he's the wide. I mean, imagine trying to trade for Jalen Waddle now as opposed to in the summer when I was ranking him at 9th overall dynasty asset. And that's just because we need to try to identify those guys now who can be Tyreek Hill for your roster. So
Yeah.
that's when we bring Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson into the conversation. And then yeah, Pittman and DJ Moore come back into the conversation because it's then now I know that DJ Moore will not be Tyreek Hill. Well, he's only 25, but things would have to dramatically change for DJ Moore. He himself can be a 40-point ceiling player, but
Hmm.
that organization has not done anything in his tenure there to make me feel as though they will get him to that ceiling.
Sure.
And then you look at Michael Pittman, and I don't even know that Michael Pittman, the player, is the type of play. He falls more into the Terry McLaurin range. While I understand the reason that people wanted to rank him highly, similar to why I ranked Waddle so high so early, you have to be early. Pittman was not the player that I chose to be early on, but I get it. You have to try to get on the train early.
Sure.
I don't believe that Pittman ever had that Tyreek Hill ceiling either. So then you have to take a look at Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. Well, that's why they're ranked over the DJ Moores, the Michael Pittmans of the world, even lower. You talk about Terry McLaurin, guys like that, because we think, or rather, we have not been proven wrong that one of those two guys could be Tyreek Hill level players. So when you look at that, let's just do a little bit of an exercise. Like, let's say you're 100% guaranteed that Tyreek Hill is going to break the yardage record this year.
Hmm.
Is there anything that Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave could do to be ranked over him in Dynasty with that knowledge this season?
No. They would have to do, because what, Jalen Waddle broke the rookie reception record last season, if I'm
Right.
remembering correctly. So like they would have to do something like that, and that's why it was fair to at least start to include Jalen Waddle like in that discussion, because if he was capable of earning those targets, and despite the fact that for all intents and purposes, I don't want Tuanon to come after me, but I mean, in the fact that they were running a highly RPOized offense, I won't call it a Mickey Mouse offense or a college offense or anything like that. Let's just say they ran a high amount of RPOs in order to get Jalen Waddle like those types of targets. But still, the fact that he was earning them and the fact that Tua knew where to go with the football, down in and down out, that is a positive thing for one Jalen Waddle. So that's why I thought it was fine. And I wasn't, and we had a number of conversations throughout the entire offseason, like during draft season and whatnot, even after the Tyreek Hill trade was in place, for me, changed nothing about my stance towards Jalen Waddle. And I thought that the two of them together could thrive, and it wasn't a one or the other thing. And folks want to test me on that, they can check my best ball shares as to who I was drafting like throughout most of the summertime. So like targets, like being able to earn targets is a skill, and once another alpha that comes into play, like that skill does not go away, and we're seeing that happen with Miami right now. So I don't have a problem with, like, at least in that specific example of Jalen Waddle, because we've seen him do it before. We've seen him be able to earn targets at a high rate and be efficient with those targets, and he's doing the exact same thing now. So I think he's fine to at least lump into that conversation. Pittman, I think, is on a different trajectory right now, but that's just because of his surroundings. And so that's where the interesting conversation comes into play, because you see Pittman on the downslope, like in his now third year, and then a guy like Garrett Wilson on the upslope of his career, in the eighth or ninth game of his career, where things
Sure.
seem to be looking up for the Jets. And it's just like, who can you expect to have those types of high ceiling games moving forward? And could it be Garrett Wilson? It absolutely could be. Who knows what they're going to do with that other wide receiver currently on the Jet squad that nobody wants to seem to mention and who I will not mention by name. But it's just, at this point, again, it goes back to the question that I'm asking, like, can you get that week winning performance out of that wide receiver? And if you can at least put that player's name in the conversation, like if they're in the conversation, not saying they're going to do it guaranteed. They're not like Tyreek Hill. They're not Cooper Kupp or Justin Jefferson or whomever. We know who those guys are. But if they can at least be in the conversation, those are the guys that I want to have like on my roster. And of course, there are many ways we can start to figure out how to identify them. I mean, we've got plenty of folks that, like, from Matt Harmon and reception perception, to see from a collegiate standpoint their capabilities before they even hit an NFL squad, and other folks that help break down tape from Matt Waldman to whomever to see like how their skills fit within the offensive structure that they find themselves in. So there are ways we can figure out like if these guys can be a part of the conversation, but it's just, are they or are they not? I mean, that's the real question that you have to try and answer for yourself.
See, I'm a little different in that. I think I'm going to rank Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave specifically ahead of Tyreek Hill sooner than most are willing to. And when I say Tyreek Hill, he's just the representation of that Stephon Diggs kind of tier.
Okay.
Um, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, and then just because Tyreek Hill's in the news, remember we are Dynasty Newsletter. So I think I'm going to be a little bit early to it, and it's more to do with this two players specifically. So Garrett Wilson first. I mean, through the first 3 weeks, he was one of the league leaders in targets, and that was with Corey Davis, who many were concerned with. Actually, you know what? I'll put myself in that camp too. I was actually kind of concerned with it because Garrett Wilson was projected to be the third wide receiver, even though he was 11th off the board.
Yeah.
And then so we had a lot of money going to Corey Davis, and then Elijah Moore was the one I wasn't as worried about. Elijah Moore just got a ton of coverage in preseason, and then it just kept snowballing and snowballing as he had a productive rookie season. But Garrett Wilson, I felt like was the superior talent, so I thought that would be okay. Now we've seen that Garrett Wilson has been able to thrive without Corey Davis in the lineup, so we do have to get Corey Davis back healthy to see how that shakes out. But then Elijah Moore has basically been shunned to the side, just not working out with the team because he wasn't getting targets. So it's not like he's out of the picture because he complained. He complained because he was out of the picture. So that tells me that I'm okay with Garrett Wilson being the premier target there. I wrote about Chris Olave in last week's Cutting Through the Noise I do each week about Dynasty's most polarizing player. And what I kind of found is that it really does not matter if there's no Jarvis Landry, if there's no Michael Thomas, if Andy Dalton's starting, if Jameis Winston's starting. None of that matters at all for Chris Olave. And that was what was so impressive about him. I went into that article with a firm stance that Garrett Wilson was my rookie wide receiver one. And I came out, you know what, I think I'm going to flip Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. So those two guys I actually do think might be those Tyreek Hill type players.
Mm-hmm.
I worry more for the Jets because I think they're going to stick with Zach Wilson too long. But I'm hoping with the Saints, now they're going to have a lot of dead cap, but Jameis Winston's probably just going to have to be their backup next year. They're probably going to keep him on the roster, but they need to draft a rookie and they need to draft a promising rookie. So it's going to be tough because they don't have a first round pick, right? So
Right.
how are they? Yeah, maybe they have to get a free agent in there, but the team's ready, so it shouldn't be too difficult to get a free agent in there. Actually, now that you think about it, because besides the quarterback position, it's a pretty enticing landing spot. So I
Mm-hmm.
guess I could see the quarterback situation getting fixed pretty quickly for the Saints. I don't see it getting fixed for the Jets because I don't blame them. They're just going to have to stick with their second overall pick from a year ago. So that's why I think those two players have enough upside to be in that Tyreek Hill tier. But to put a bow on that conversation, that's just how much nuance goes into ranking these players, especially when we get into the regular season and they're doing stuff week in and week out that's good, bad. DJ Moore has a great box score week last week, but he was pretty disappointing until the Hail Mary. And it's like all this stuff has to get contextualized to try to put together your dynasty rankings.
Mm-hmm.
We've got one more big player to discuss, but first let's make sure everybody knows who we are, where we come from. So this is the Dynasty Newsletter. We come from the Footballguys newsletter that will come straight to your email each week. It comes directly from Joe Bryant, contributions from Cecil Lammy and Sigmund Bloom. They'll bring you all the news and notes from around the league directly into your inbox, so you don't have to get all of these notifications and hope you don't miss one. You'll just get it all right there in case you miss something on Sunday. You're all fresh, ready for the week, ready to attack that waiver wire and get those lineups submitted. So make sure you go to footballguys.com, subscribe to the email newsletter, and then we will take tidbits from that email newsletter and we will create the Dynasty newsletter for you guys. The last guy we're going to talk about is Justin Fields. So we got into that quarterback or that wide receiver conversation, and then we just kind of have to get into what is going on with Justin Fields. Do we think that this is a long-term solution for him? Do we think that Matt Eberflus has figured it out? So are you buying the performances we've gotten from Justin Fields since the bye week?
Buying it, I mean, I will
Is he a
say
league winner this year?
a league winner? Sure, yeah, because I think the fantasy production will be there, and but the fantasy production to buying his performance, I think, are two separate conversations. Because
Well, he
while
wasn't a
his
league winner before the bye week.
Well, I would. Well, no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't say that because I think before the bye week, his rushing production was starting to was starting to pick up to the point where we could see it.
Yeah.
There was, I mean, his the design rushing rate was starting to pick up. Even the rushing production, rushing efficiency, like that portion was coming up. We just hadn't seen the passing efficiency come along with it. So
Well, he
I,
wasn't being allowed to pass as well.
that's true. And
So
then
that's
this
why I
is
think the bye week made a little bit of a difference because I mean, it was training wheels. It was training wheels
eh,
before.
I don't. What's it? Training wheels. See, I don't. Well, I guess I would agree with that to some degree because so this past week, if you were to just look at the box scores and just say that, oh well, if you're looking at his passing production, I mean, it's the first time that he's actually been able to include both the wide receivers and the tight ends. I mean, heck, the guy that won the Millie double stacked Justin Fields with Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet, and it
Yep.
wound up paying off. And when has that ever happened? Has not, at least for Justin Fields. So I would say that if you just looked at the box scores, looked at the results, you would say yes. But if you take a look at his passing chart on Next Gen Stats, no passes across the middle of the field this past week. I mean, they're using play action in order to move things like from side to side. And then, I mean, it allows him to like use his zone reads in order to actually like sprint off to the side. That 62 yard or 68 yard scamper that he had for a touchdown. Zone read off to the left side. I mean, so it's just nothing across the middle of the field. And so as a quarterback, I mean, you have to be able to access that part of the game. That was the biggest thing for Jalen Hurts coming into this season. So while I would say that I do buy it because it shows at least a progression in the coaching staff's willingness to integrate Fields' skill set into the entirety of the offense. I buy that. I mean, looking at from the play action rate, design rushing rate, and then also seeing the results just this past week, I buy into that portion. But do I buy into Fields as a complete quarterback passer? Not yet, but that's okay. I mean, that should be completely fine considering it's taken 9 weeks for Matt Eberflus to realize that he has one of the most athletic quarterbacks. I mean, the one quarterback that's capable of breaking Michael Vick's single season or single game rushing record, like in the regular season. I don't know why it took him 2 months to figure that out, but here we are. So the only thing that I'm still not buying into is him like progressing as a passer. But once I see more like middle of the field concepts, like it's stuff like that, I mean, more progression from him in that standpoint, then I'll buy it. But from a fantasy standpoint, sure, I'll buy this. Absolutely. I mean, we've seen him actually have like, multiple high scoring weeks, like over the past like 2 to 3 weeks now. He's been viable as a quarterback one for like at least almost a month now. So that portion I buy, but then the NFL fantasy, like NFL real football portion of it, that's where I'm saying, yeah, I kind of buy it, but I want to see more before I say that. Yep, I mean he's here to stay. Like there's no problems, and we're just anybody that hating on Fields can go argue with their mother.
Yeah, that's where we differ a little bit because I think that is why Justin Fields is still a buy in dynasty, even though most people are going to tell you he's not because he has produced so well over the last month. But there's so many people that still want to see more, and it
Mm-hmm.
really is going to come down to it's almost like a Kyle Pitts light situation in that if you were like me and have been on the Fields train ever since draft night, I've had the same Twitter header ever since then. So I don't want to hear it just because everybody else is saying that. You can check my receipts. There's people who have loved Justin Fields since draft night and didn't understand why anybody other than Trevor Lawrence was drafted ahead of him. And now we're starting to feel like, why hasn't this happened already? This could have had, because you're right. He's not a world beater as a passer right now, but I actually kind of like that he's utilizing outside the numbers because that's the more difficult passes. To develop into. Usually you're getting those dink and dunk passes and then you're getting outside the numbers. But I just have not understood why. Just let him make mistakes. It was almost like they were just trying to play really good football with a really good roster and then hope that he doesn't lose them the games. It's like you don't have a really good roster. You have one of the most athletic quarterbacks in the game. He fumbles either once or twice every week. Okay, that
Mm-hmm.
clean it up, but You're going to deal with it. And if he throws a few picks, what do you have to lose? You haven't provided him until trading for Claypool with a quality supporting cast. So I don't know why the training wheels were on, but they swear that they looked into all these offenses. Like, dude, why didn't you? What did you do this offseason if you didn't look into offenses that were going to work with your quarterback? Like, I it's a very frustrating situation, but Justin Fields is still a buy for that reason because everyone's saying, yeah, I like the rushing production. I like that they're opening things up for him, but I still want to see more. Well, that's a way to capitalize. And then if you do see that more, well, you already have him on your roster and you get an immediate value boost. So that's why I think even though typically when people are in the news, people are producing the way that he is, you wait for things to simmer down and try to get a trade for him. I still think the ceiling's there for Justin Fields. I still think that there's value to be added. So maybe if there's somebody who doesn't believe that he's going to develop as a passer, they might trade him away right now and think that they stole from you.
I guess I don't disagree with the idea that he's a buy, but I'm wondering though. So let's say, I mean, for sake of argument, let's say that he is on the same trajectory as Jalen Hurts, because for all intents and purposes, there were the same questions about Jalen Hurts like throughout most of the 2021 season. Like, can he throw across the middle of the field? We know he's good as a rusher. I mean, the passing accuracy, I mean, being able to, like, in true drop back situations, like if it's 3rd down and 7, can he get you a bucket and actually convert the down and continue things moving? I mean, it's the same questions that folks had about Lamar 3 years ago. Like in true drop, like, two passing situations, like can Lamar convert like on 3rd down? Well, when you add a guy like Mark Andrews, and then for the short time that he had him, it was only like a few games, but for the short time they had Rashad Bateman, you put the players around him, then they can succeed. For Philadelphia, same thing. You draft a good receiver like Devonta Smith. You already have a guy like Dallas Goedert, but since Zach Ertz was there, you ship him off. Dallas Goedert becomes a larger part of the offense. And then, of course, you trade for a complete grown, sorry, Joe, man like A.J. Brown. You wind up having an alpha wide receiver on your team. And, of course, now you progress as a passer. Will the Bears do the same thing for Justin Fields is my question. Chase Claypool ain't going to do it. Like, Chase Claypool ain't A.J. Brown. So it's just, I
Yeah, but you
wonder.
have to think about what was available. I guess the only problem is why didn't they just get AJ Brown?
They could have
But
done that. I
you
mean,
could say that to any team, like
yeah.
31 other teams should have tried to get AJ Brown for the price. I mean,
Well, I'm not
what
even
was it, a
saying they
first, a
needed to go
third?
get, I'm not even saying they needed to go get AJ Brown. I'm just saying with the free agent market that was throughout the offseason, knowing that they're in the roster that they had, like, why couldn't they have made this move beforehand? The Steelers weren't going to keep Chase Claypool
Oh, I
after this
mean,
season. Or, I
I
mean,
I I can't stand Matty Eberflus. I think I didn't like how he came in and was kind of wishy-washy on
yeah.
um,
So it's
Fields
just,
being the guy, and then he waited until he saw, like,
mhm.
you see Justin Fields every day. You should have known that he had this in him. Why did you wait? And then you're right. I mean, they had other opportunities, but I don't think they believed in Fields at the time of those opportunities. I think when it came time to believe in Fields, it was up against the trade deadline, and guess who was available? Chase
Right.
Claypool.
So now we're entrusting them in order to take the next step, because we have to assume that they're not done yet. So we're entrusting them now with the additional, no, because I thought they used the second in that they got in the Roquan Smith deal in order to get Claypool. So we're entrusting them with whatever picks that they have for next season in the hopes
It was
that they
their own
use
second.
that. Oh, okay. But still, I mean, we're entrusting them with their picks for next season to continue to build out this receiving core. Do you think they're really going to do that?
So apparently it was their own second because they had to beat Green Bay.
Yeah,
So they
that's
had
right.
to use a second
Which is
ahead of Green
probably
Bay.
at this point a poor bet on the Steelers' part, because it looks like Green
Right.
Bay is probably going to have the worst
we
pick.
we love poetic justice.
Yeah.
I do think that a switch has flipped, and I Eberflus is falling into my good graces a little bit more. I mean, he was a first time head coach, and it is. I understand the toughness to like bank your whole career on this quarterback that you did not draft, but I feel like it
Mhm.
comes with the territory. The guy was just drafted top 12 last year. You're coming to make him a star in the NFL. So they should have been on guys this offseason, whether maybe even Hollywood. But is Hollywood that big of an upgrade over Chase? Like, yes, a good,
No.
like a little bit, but not a huge upgrade over Chase. I mean, he's a little
No,
bit of
they
an
they
upgrade
they
over Chase
need
Claypool.
I mean, if they can't draft a guy, I mean, this will be on us over the next, 4 weeks or so to start looking at the 23 class. But I mean, can they get a player a wide receiver that can win at all three levels? I mean, that's what they need. And if
Yeah.
you're relying on a passer, I mean, this is the same thing that folks have been clamoring for Lamar Jackson. This is the same thing that everybody wanted for Jalen Hurts, and they went out and did it. And I am sure if that drumbeat isn't already beating for the Bears do the same thing for Justin Fields, they're daggone sure going to be doing it once we start hearing more about this 23 draft class. Like whomever the top receiver is, the hope would be that Chicago finds some way in order to pick them up, despite the fact that they have numerous holes throughout the entirety of the roster. I mean, continuing to build around Fields, if that's the thing, then that has to be a better wide receiver core than what they currently have, because it's just
Yeah.
this ain't it.
Yeah, but the problem is that they weren't even using Mooney really. So I wrote about Mooney this year too, and it's just that he if you're only passing 20 times a game and you're giving 7 targets to Mooney but only connecting on 3, it's like, all right, let's get that fixed first because Mooney is talented. So I agree that they do need to add somebody, but I would still, before even worrying about adding somebody, like to see Chase Claypool and Darnell Mooney utilized like in any capacity. We need to get up to like 27 passes a game. They're usually throwing 20 or less. We need 7 more passes a game. We need a big target share for Chase Claypool and Darnell Mooney. And we'll go from there if they're going to add a third option. But Cole Kmet should have been more involved all year too. He's not as bad as like he's not a 2 target tight end in my opinion. I'm not even the biggest Cole Kmet fanboy, but he's not a 2 target tight end. So
He's
I think
fine.
a lot of this is on Matt Eberflus, and I think he's starting to figure it out.
Yeah, and like for most coaches, it does take time, and we can be couch coaches and
Mm-hmm.
armchair coordinators like all day long because we think that we see and we think that we know more than some of the guys that are doing it like day in and day out. And of course, there are other factors that have to be considered, but it's just getting the ball to your best players. Seems to be a tough concept for for some teams, and if the best players are Darnell Mooney, Cole Kmet, now Chase Claypool, hopefully they can get them involved a bit more moving forward.
Yeah, I wish it didn't take him so long, but I do like that he is turning it around halfway through the year.
Yeah,
It's starting to get a little bit better of an outlook. So that's going to do it for today. Thank you all so much for coming out. Please like, subscribe, rate, review. Remember to check out our Spotify channel. We are no longer on the Audible feed, so make sure you check out ours. Please subscribe and leave us a review. We would greatly appreciate that, and we will catch y'all next week. Peace.